She had never imagined that a simple Friday evening could feel so heavy, like the air itself was holding its breath. Mara watched the office lights flicker as people trickled out, the hum of computers slowly fading into silence. Her fingers hovered over the keyboard, but she wasn't really working. Her thoughts were elsewhere, tangled with uncertainty she didn't know how to untangle. The clock on the wall ticked past 6:45 p.m., and Mara realized she wasn't even tired. She wasn't used to staying late, but there was something about finishing this report tonight that felt necessary, almost like she was delaying something inevitable. Outside the window, the city lights flickered, tiny constellations reflecting off the glass, and she couldn't shake the feeling that someone was watching. It was only then that the door creaked open, and she looked up, startled. To her surprise, it was Daniel, her coworker's brother, standing awkwardly in the doorway. Mara had met him only a handful of times before, at casual office gatherings, but tonight his presence felt different. He carried a sort of quiet urgency she couldn't place. "I hope I'm not disturbing you," he said, his voice low but steady. There was a faint smile, almost shy, and Mara felt herself searching for the right words. She motioned to the chair across her desk. No, not at all. Just finishing some work," she replied, though her voice sounded distant even to her own ears.
Daniel stepped in, closing the door behind him. "I didn't mean to intrude. I had a question, something I wasn't sure who else to ask." He hesitated, and Mara felt the tension in the room tighten around them. "What kind of question?" she asked, curiosity nudging past the unease. He sank into the chair, glancing at the paper scattered across her desk. "It's personal," he said. I'm not sure how to phrase it." Mara's heart thumped. She didn't usually find herself in situations like this, where someone's presence demanded more than just casual politeness. Her mind raced for reassurance, for some anchor in the ordinary. "Take your time," she said softly. Daniel's eyes met hers, earnest and searching. "It's about my sister, really. I've seen the way she talks about you, and I guess I just want to understand. She seems happy, but also hesitant sometimes. I don't know how to read it." Mara's chest tightened. His words were careful, tentative, but they carried a weight she hadn't expected. She wanted to reassure him, to smile and tell him everything was fine, but the truth was far more complicated. She didn't know what his sister, her coworker, was really feeling, and the thought of speaking for her made Mara uneasy. I think she cares a lot about you," Mara said slowly, realizing halfway through that she had crossed a line she hadn't meant to. "But everyone shows it differently. Sometimes people hide things, even from the people they care about."
Daniel leaned back as if absorbing her words, and then the room felt smaller, quieter, more intimate, despite the office setting. Mara wondered if he noticed the way the streetlights outside had begun to blur against the window, casting a soft glow over everything. "I guess I just want to know," he whispered, almost to himself. "Is she happy?" Mara's throat tightened, and she realized she didn't have an answer. She wanted to lie, to say yes without hesitation, but she couldn't. The truth was murky, a tangle of hopes, doubts, and unspoken fears that Mara herself was still navigating. She looked at him, her mind blank for a heartbeat, before saying, I don't know." Daniel nodded slowly, his expression a mixture of relief and frustration. "I suppose there isn't a simple answer," he murmured. He stood up, brushing off his jeans. "Thanks for trying, though. I just needed to hear someone else say it." Mara watched him leave, her fingers trembling slightly as she reached for her coffee cup. The room felt empty again, but heavier somehow. She stared at the darkened screen, wondering if she had just opened a door that should have stayed closed. Outside, the city carried on in oblivious motion, but Mara felt suspended, caught between understanding and uncertainty. Her thoughts kept circling back to Daniel's question, to the way it had lodged itself in her chest like a quiet ache she couldn't name.
If you're enjoying this story so far, please like the video and subscribe for more heartfelt tales. And yet, even as she tried to focus on her work, a soft voice lingered in her mind, haunting and persistent.
What if knowing the answer wasn't enough? The next morning, Mara arrived at the office earlier than usual. The corridors were quiet, the hum of the air conditioning louder than usual, and her thoughts kept drifting back to Daniel's question. She replayed the scene in her mind, the way he had looked at her, searching for an answer she couldn't give. She poured herself a cup of coffee and tried to focus on emails, spreadsheets, anything to anchor herself to the normalcy of work. But every time she glanced at the clock, her mind wandered. 6:45, 6:50, 6:55. She was counting minutes like they were heartbeats, anticipating the moment she might see him again, even though she had no reason to. It was during a brief lull that her coworker, Leela, appeared by her desk. Leela's presence always carried a sort of warmth, a buoyancy that made Mara feel slightly less trapped by her own thoughts. "Morning, Mara. You look distracted," she said, tilting her head. Mara forced a small smile. "Just thinking," she replied vaguely, trying to sound casual. Leela didn't press, but the curiosity in her eyes lingered, like a quiet echo of the previous night's conversation. Mara felt a ping of guilt. She hadn't told Leela anything about Daniel's visit, and yet, somehow, it felt heavier keeping it inside. By mid-morning, the office had grown livelier. Phones rang, keyboards clicked, and Mara tried to immerse herself in work. But she couldn't escape the image of Daniel's face, the seriousness in his eyes, the soft way he had asked about Leela's happiness. There was something unnerving about the way he trusted her opinion, as though she carried insight into a world Mara herself barely understood. During lunch, Mara found herself alone in the small break room, staring out the window at the bustling streets below. She wasn't expecting anyone, yet a familiar voice made her start slightly. "Mara?" She turned to see Daniel standing there, holding a cup of coffee and wearing the same quiet expression that had unsettled her the night before. He smiled gently, almost shyly, and Mara felt her chest tighten. "Daniel," she said, trying to sound composed, "you're here early too?" He nodded, setting his coffee down on the counter. "I wanted to see if you had a moment. I've been thinking about our conversation last night." Mara swallowed. "Me too," she admitted softly, unsure where this was heading. He leaned against the counter, careful not to invade her space. "I keep wondering if I'm asking the wrong questions," he confessed, "or maybe the right questions in the wrong way." His gaze held hers, earnest and unflinching. "You're not," Mara said quickly, surprising herself. "You're just trying to understand. That's not wrong." He smiled faintly, a mixture of relief and lingering tension. "It's just, she doesn't say everything. I see moments, fleeting expressions, things I don't fully understand. I want to be there for her, but I don't know how." Mara felt a deep sympathy for him. She knew what it was like to navigate relationships quietly, to feel the weight of emotions that weren't yours, but still pressed against you. "Sometimes," she said gently, "all we can do is listen and observe. We can't solve everything, but being there matters more than you realize." Daniel nodded, his shoulders relaxing slightly. "I suppose I just needed to hear that from someone else, someone outside her circle, who might see things differently." They stood in silence for a moment, the hum of the office around them fading into something almost intimate. Mara wondered if she had underestimated the effect of simple words, the way honesty, even cautious honesty, could ease a tension that had seemed unbearable. "I should get back to work," Daniel said eventually, giving her a small, grateful smile. "Thank you, Mara, really." Mara nodded, watching him leave, and felt a strange mix of relief and longing. She couldn't pinpoint why his presence lingered so heavily in her mind, but she knew that the quiet tension from the night before wasn't going anywhere. It had planted a seed, a question without an answer, a curiosity that refused to fade. As the afternoon wore on, Mara found herself staring at the clock again, counting the minutes, her mind wandering back to Daniel's words, to the soft uncertainty in his eyes. Something about his presence had shifted the rhythm of her thoughts, and she realized with a jolt that she was waiting, though for what she couldn't say. And then, just as the office began to clear for the evening, her phone buzzed, a message from an unknown number. She opened it cautiously, and her heart skipped a beat. It was Daniel. "Can we talk after work? There's something I need to ask you, something I can't figure out alone." Mara's fingers lingered over the screen, a mixture of apprehension and anticipation curling in her chest. She didn't know what the question would be, or if she would know how to answer it, but a quiet certainty settled over her. Tonight, everything would feel different. The office emptied slowly that evening, the usual chatter replaced by the soft hum of computers and the occasional shuffle of papers. Mara packed her bag with deliberate slowness, her mind circling Daniel's message over and over. She couldn't predict what he wanted to ask, and that made her both nervous and oddly excited. By the time she stepped into the lobby, the sun had dipped low, casting long amber streaks across the polished floor. The city outside was alive with movement, cars glinting in the fading light, people rushing toward their evening plans. Mara took a deep breath, trying to steady the flutter in her chest. "Hey," a familiar voice said. She turned to see Daniel waiting near the revolving doors, hands tucked into his coat pockets. His expression was calm, almost neutral, but his eyes betrayed a quiet tension. "Hi," Mara said softly, forcing a casual tone she didn't feel. "Thanks for meeting me," he said, giving a small smile. "I know this is a bit unexpected." Mara shook her head, a small laugh escaping her. "Not at all. I'm glad you asked." They walked together through the city streets, the evening air crisp and filled with the faint scent of rain. Mara found herself noticing things she hadn't before, the way his coat brushed lightly against his arms, the steady rhythm of his steps, the quiet thoughtfulness in his expression. "I've been thinking a lot," Daniel said, breaking the silence, "about what I said yesterday, about my sister, about trying to understand her." He paused, as if choosing his next words carefully. "You don't have to explain everything to me," Mara said gently, "but I'll listen if you want to talk." He nodded, appreciating her tone, and they continued walking, their footsteps echoing softly against the pavement. "It's just, she hides things sometimes. Not on purpose, I don't think. But she doesn't say everything she feels, and I want to be there for her without overstepping." Mara's chest tightened at the sincerity in his voice. She understood the desire to protect someone, to be present without intruding. "I think that's all anyone can do," she said slowly. "Be patient, be present, listen more than you speak. Sometimes that's enough." Daniel nodded again, and they fell into a comfortable silence. Mara felt the weight of unspoken words between them, the kind of quiet that both unnerved and comforted. She realized that he was trusting her with a fragment of something deeply personal, and that trust was fragile, delicate as glass. They reached a small park just a few blocks from the office. The benches were empty, the trees swaying gently in the evening breeze. Daniel stopped near one, looking out at the soft glow of the streetlights. I have to ask you something," he said finally, turning to face her. His voice was low, almost hesitant, but there was an urgency in it that Mara couldn't ignore. Her heart beat faster. "Okay," she said softly. "Ask." He took a deep breath. "Do you think she's truly happy? With everything? With life, with work, with people around her?" Mara blinked. The question landed heavier than she expected. She wanted to give him an answer, a reassurance, but her mind spun with doubt. Happiness wasn't a single, static thing. It was fleeting, complicated, layered with choices and fears. I don't know," she admitted finally, her voice barely above a whisper. "I can't speak for her, but I think she's trying. She's doing her best." Daniel's shoulders slumped slightly. Relief mingled with a trace of sadness. "I guess that's all anyone can hope for," he said quietly. They stood there for a long moment, the city moving around them, indifferent yet persistent. Mara felt a strange mix of empathy and unease. The conversation had opened something she hadn't anticipated, a door to understanding that might never fully close. Finally, Daniel gave a faint smile. "Thank you," he said again. I just needed to hear that, even if it's not a clear answer." Mara nodded, her own lips curving into a small smile. "Sometimes there isn't one," she said softly, "and that's okay." As they walked back toward the office, the first drops of rain began to fall, lightly pattering on their shoulders. Mara pulled her coat tighter, feeling the cool moisture mix with the warmth of the conversation they had shared. By the time they reached the building, the rain had intensified slightly, painting the city streets with reflective streaks of light. Mara felt a quiet tension lingering in her chest, a mixture of anticipation and uncertainty. She knew this conversation wasn't the last. They both carried questions too heavy for easy answers. And then, as she waved goodbye and stepped inside the lobby, her phone buzzed. A message from Leela. "Hey, are you coming to get dinner tonight? There's someone I want you to meet." Mara froze, her mind spinning. Could it be Daniel again? Or someone else entirely? The unexpected twist sent a thrill of apprehension through her, leaving her with a lingering, unspoken question. The evening air was cooler than Mara expected as she stepped out of her apartment, umbrella in hand. Leela's invitation lingered in her mind like a soft echo. "Someone I want you to meet." She didn't know what to expect, and the uncertainty made her chest tighten in a way she hadn't felt since Daniel's question. When she arrived at the small, cozy restaurant, the warm glow from the windows felt welcoming, almost intimate. Inside, Leela waved her over with a bright smile. "You made it. I've saved you a seat," she said, patting the chair beside her. Mara's heart fluttered as she took her place. "Who is it?" Mara asked softly, curiosity tinged with apprehension. "You'll see," Leela replied mysteriously, her eyes twinkling. "He's someone important to me, and I think you should meet him too." Mara's thoughts immediately went to Daniel, but she hesitated. Could this be another twist she wasn't prepared for? She tried to calm herself, focusing on Leela's presence as an anchor. The waiter brought menus, but Mara barely looked at them. Her attention was elsewhere, scanning the entrance for whoever Leela had wanted her to meet. And then he appeared, tall, casual, with a familiar, hesitant smile. Daniel. Mara felt her pulse quickened, though she tried to remain composed. He waved awkwardly, as if unsure whether to approach or retreat. Leela noticed the subtle tension between them and nudged Mara. "Go on, say hello." Taking a deep breath, Mara stood. "Hi," she said, her voice steadier than she felt. "Hi," Daniel replied softly. He hesitated for a moment and then added, "I didn't expect to see you here." Mara shook her head, a small laugh escaping. "Neither did I. Leela didn't tell me much." He nodded, and for a moment, the two of them stood in a quiet, almost fragile understanding. Then Leela clapped her hands gently. "Well, now that introductions are done, let's order before the kitchen closes." The dinner unfolded with laughter, stories, and light conversation. Yet beneath the casual atmosphere, Mara felt a thread of tension weaving between her and Daniel. Every glance, every pause, seemed loaded with unspoken thoughts, memories of their earlier conversation. At one point, Daniel leaned slightly closer, lowering his voice. "Mara, can I ask you something personal?" Her stomach fluttered. "Yes," she said softly. "Of course." He glanced around briefly, then asked, "Do you think people really change, or do they just adapt?" Mara considered the question carefully. Change wasn't a simple path, she thought. "I think people grow," she said slowly. "Sometimes we adapt, sometimes we shift without realizing it, and sometimes we stay the same in ways we never see until someone points it out." Daniel's eyes searched hers, as if looking for confirmation or perhaps reassurance. "And do you think someone could change for another person?" The question lingered between them, delicate and complicated. Mara felt a quiet ache in her chest. I think people can try," she said carefully, "but it's never simple. You can't change for someone else completely. You can only change with them, alongside them." Daniel's lips pressed into a thin line, a mixture of understanding and something she couldn't quite name. He nodded slowly, and for a moment, silence enveloped them like a soft, unspoken agreement. As dessert arrived, Mara noticed the subtle shift in his demeanor. He was no longer hesitant, but contemplative, carrying a weight she knew she couldn't lift for him. They exchanged quiet smiles, sharing a connection that needed no words, yet was filled with meaning. The evening drew to a close, and the soft glow of streetlights guided them outside. Rain had returned in gentle drops, and Mara felt the world narrow to this moment, this small space between them. Daniel's voice broke the quiet. "Thank you for tonight," he said softly. "It helped, more than you know." Mara smiled, a warmth blooming in her chest. "I'm glad," she said. I hope it gave you some clarity." He hesitated, as if weighing whether to say more. Then he nodded, slowly, turning to leave. Mara watched him go, her thoughts tangled with curiosity, empathy, and an unspoken question she hadn't dared to ask herself yet. Would there ever be a time when answers came easily?
As Mara walked back home, her umbrella shielding her from the drizzle, she couldn't shake the feeling that the night had shifted something deep inside her. Something delicate, perhaps even transformative, though she wasn't sure she could name it. When she reached her apartment, she set down her bag and glanced at her phone. Another message had appeared, this one from Leela. "He might want to talk again soon. Are you okay with that?" Mara stared at the screen, a quiet tension curling in her chest. She didn't know what the next conversation would bring, or if she would know how to respond. But deep down, she understood that some questions, once asked, linger in ways that refuse to leave. The following evening, Mara found herself pacing her apartment, phone in hand. Leela's message from last night echoed in her thoughts. He might want to talk again soon. She didn't know whether to feel anticipation, apprehension, or a quiet mix of both. Something about Daniel's presence lingered in a way she couldn't easily shake. When the knock came at the door, her chest fluttered. She opened it to find Daniel standing there, umbrella in hand, a gentle hesitancy in his smile. "Hi," he said softly, as if greeting someone fragile yet familiar. "Hi," Mara replied, her voice steady though her heart raced. She stepped aside, gesturing him in. "Come in, it's raining." He nodded, closing the door carefully behind him. The sound of rain pattering against the window filled the silence, a quiet rhythm that felt intimate, almost comforting. They settled into the small living room, each careful to respect the unspoken distance between them. Daniel's eyes met hers. I wanted to ask again," he began, his voice tentative, "about what we talked about the other night, about my sister. I keep thinking about it, and I realize I don't just want an answer. I want perspective. Yours." Mara's chest tightened. She had expected this conversation to be difficult, but the sincerity in his eyes made it feel heavier than she imagined. I can try," she said softly, "but you should know, some things don't have easy answers." He nodded. "I understand. I need to hear it, even if it's complicated." Mara took a deep breath. She's navigating her life the best way she knows how. Sometimes that means making choices that aren't obvious, or hiding certain things, even from the people who care about her most. But that doesn't mean she isn't happy in her own way. Daniel's gaze softened, and Mara felt the weight of his unspoken gratitude. "So, you think she's content? That she's okay?" "I think she's trying," Mara said gently, "and that counts. Trying, learning, growing, those are the things that matter more than any immediate happiness. She's shaping her life quietly, in ways you might not see yet, but that's okay. That's her way." He exhaled, a slow, relieved breath. "Thank you," he said quietly. Hearing that, it helps. I've been afraid of overstepping, of misunderstanding, but I just wanted to know that she's not unhappy, that she's safe in her own life. Mara smiled faintly, feeling a mixture of relief and quiet admiration for him. She is, and you being present for her, even just as a listener, makes a difference. They sat in silence for a few moments, listening to the rain. The air between them was still charged with the gentle tension of shared understanding, but it was lighter now, almost soothing. Mara realized that the questions that had felt so heavy before were now threads of connection, linking them through trust and empathy. "I don't want to intrude," Daniel said after a pause, "but can I check in again sometimes, just to talk?" Mara nodded, a soft warmth rising in her chest. "Of course," she said. "I don't think that would be intrusion at all." A quiet smile passed between them, one that carried unspoken understanding.
patience, and trust. Mara felt the lingering unease of unanswered questions fade slightly, replaced by a sense of companionship in navigating the unknown. Eventually, Daniel stood, umbrella in hand. "Thank you again, Mara, for listening and for helping me see things more clearly." "You're welcome," she replied softly. "And thank you, too, for trusting me with your question. That takes courage." He nodded, offering a faint, appreciative smile before stepping into the rain.
Mara watched him disappear into the evening, the city lights reflecting off wet pavement, feeling a quiet sense of closure and anticipation intertwined. Later, as she settled into her own quiet space, Mara realized that sometimes questions don't need definitive answers to carry meaning. The act of seeking, listening, and sharing was enough to forge understanding. And sometimes, just sometimes, that was enough to soften the weight of uncertainty and replace it with something warmer, a fragile, hopeful connection. Mara sank back into her chair. The rain continued its gentle rhythm against the window. She felt lighter, her mind no longer spinning with endless possibilities. Daniel's question, the one she hadn't known how to answer at first, had led them both to a quiet truth. Some answers aren't immediate, but the willingness to face them together creates its own kind of clarity. And in that moment, Mara smiled softly to herself, feeling a gentle calm settle in her chest. The night had brought uncertainty, tension, and questions she couldn't fully resolve, but it had also brought understanding, patience, and trust. For the first time in days, she felt as though the world outside her window was not something to fear, but something to watch quietly, knowing that some questions, while unanswered, could still guide hearts closer together.